Have another phoner joining us right now, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and that is Anthony Ruggiero. Anthony, thanks so much for joining us here. And Anthony, I'd like to get your thoughts here on what this does appear, as I mentioned, to be the largest of these nuclear tests. This also coming in the background. We should mention that Kim Jong-un saying that he inspected the loading of a hydrogen bomb onto an ICBM just earlier yesterday. Anthony?
Right. Thanks for having me. It looks like North Korea is sending another signal to the United States and our allies in the region that it will continue its nuclear programs, nuclear weapons programs. And, North Korea has also very clearly said by their actions and their words that they're not interested in negotiating away this nuclear program. It's part of the reason why we need, more robust sanctions against North Korea. We have nothing near what we had against Iran.
And do you think that this particular action, if the nuclear test, will get the Security Council of the UN to put those more stringent motions in place there? What do you think it's going to take?
Well, the United States is the one that has to show a leadership role here. I think the Trump administration has really started to do that. What we had with Iran in the 2010 time period is that the UN sanctions were sort of the foundation of sanctions, but the only thing that really turned the tide was the United States working with our allies, putting forward more robust sanctions at a national, supranational, and a multinational way. And the issue here is that, is the Trump administration prepared to do that? It looks like they are going to press forward and do that. What we have here really is China and Russia who are not interested in solving this problem. All they're interested in doing is delaying and pushing forward this problem. That's why for the last 10 years we have not really come up with a solution. The Chinese are the ones that are allowing their entities and individuals and banks to facilitate North Korea's sanctions evasion, and this is what's allowing the program to continue to move forward.
Yeah, so it seems like how stringent of sanctions could the U.S. put in place if you don't have China signing off on it and Russia signing off on it? It seems like it wouldn't be toothless, but it may not be as effective as if you can get Beijing on board.
Well, the issue here is that we're never going to get Beijing and Moscow on board on sanctions that would target their own entities and individuals. And the interesting thing that has come out over the last couple of weeks is, a perfect example is that a Russian company wanted to sell gas oil to North Korea, but that Russian company wanted U.S. dollars. And North Korea cannot do those transactions because they're prohibited. And what the Russian company had to do was create companies in Singapore to allow that to happen. What that means is that there's vulnerability there. When people want to conduct U.S. dollar transactions, it's the United States government that can stop those. So China and Russia value their access to the U.S. dollar more than they value their business with North Korea. And that's the choice that they have to be presented with. So you're right, if they're not supportive of sanctions at the UN, but I think, we get ourselves into what we like to call the provocation response cycle, where North Korea does a provocation, we convince ourselves that we have very strong sanctions at the UN when we really don't. And so we have to somehow break out of that cycle. And the way to break out of that cycle is to focus on the problem areas. And those areas, unfortunately, are China and Russia.
Yeah, and you talk about stricter sanctions. In a lot of ways, though, they tend to hurt the populace, right? And you hear the reports of starvation and malnutrition. What would it take to perhaps see some kind of regime change, maybe even a peaceful transition there? Maybe it's hard to see at this particular juncture, but go back to the 80s and not a lot of people were seeing the fall of the wall, too many years ahead of that. So what do you think, is there a way to use them strategically to maybe bring about something like that?
Right. I mean, I think one of the myths of North Korea sanctions is that it impacts the people. The UN itself, there's a panel of experts that evaluates sanctions, and that the sanctions are not what is harming the people. It's the North Korean regime, really. When you talk about billions of dollars of money that goes into North Korea, and where it goes is the military, it goes to the elite, and it goes to these weapons programs. And you're right. I mean, if our goal here is denuclearization, which I believe should still be our goal, getting rid of North Korea's nuclear weapons, we have to start wondering if this is the regime that will be able to do that, and whether we need a different kind of regime in North Korea. Now, that doesn't mean, a military action as the most likely source, but it means perhaps our policies need to be adjusted. There was an article, I believe, in the Washington Post that put that forward, right, that suggested why are we taking regime change off the table. So certainly this regime is the one that is the problem. They're starving, as you said, they're starving their own people, but they're, happy to, have a nuclear weapons program that's not allowing their people to eat.
That's right. And we were talking a little bit with Gordon Chang about the shows of force that we've seen. No doubt we'll see something as a show in the next few days, but is there really anything along those lines that the U.S. and South Korea can do to show some intimidation to North Korea? They've seen a lot of these in the past.
Right. I think the show of force, whether it's I believe it was last week, flying the F-35 and the strategic bombers, those are always important. Earlier this year we had the 2 aircraft carriers in the region. That was important too. I mean, the message that sends is that North Korea, while they can do these tests, they have to understand that there will be consequences for military action. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, 7 years ago, that North Korea sunk a South Korean naval vessel, killing over 40 sailors, and in the same year,